supply chain, consulting, warehouse operations, market share, revenue, material handling, sales, transportation.
It's the end of the week. It's the end of the week. It's the end of the week. It's the end of the week.
Hey, David.
Hey Charles, how are you?
Very good. It's the end of the week.
End of the week.
You know? Although, good luck. Why would he tell us good luck?
Maybe we need luck to improve the quality of this show.
I don't know. I think it gets better week by week
Yeah.
as we, sharpen it up.
Yep.
So what are we talking about today? I believe, if I may,
Mm-hmm.
this is a behind the headlines episode where someone on staff sends an article, supply chain related, and asks us to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the article this week?
The article is about Stanley Black & Decker, who wanted to not nearshore but reshore its the production of its Craftsman brand here in the U.S. and which was partially sparked by during COVID wanted to shorten supply chains, also kind of not capitalize but use the "Made in America, Made in the U.S." Slogan in order to not to justify but to initiate such a change, bringing it from Asia. That article says basically it was a complete disaster.
They're shutting down the factory.
Has been shut down. $90 million investment.
$90 million investment
Supposed
in a full automated facility
Yeah, manufacturing.
that could ultimately never really deliver anything.
Yeah, exactly. Had huge problems. Was supposed to take 18 months. Took more than 4 years. Or no, 4 years afterwards. Decided
Part
to
of
shut
that
down.
is
COVID.
COVID.
Yeah.
Which, hey, that hit everybody.
Still.
Yeah?
Yeah. And
Crazy.
the what comes out of it is the difficulty of automating some tasks that are manual.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. I mean, $90 million project, when you're talking about, I thought I read that the Craftsman revenues, only Craftsman in this group is about $1 billion.
$1 billion. Yeah.
So $90 million.
Yeah.
You could pretend the profit margin is huge, but probably they took 2 years or more of actual net profit and built this facility.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge. And so some competitors commented later on saying that those who succeeded in doing this and bringing production to North America did not go like a full automation route
Right.
or automated parts.
Right. That was the CEO of Snap-on who had pointed out that so traditionally, and maybe let's call it 30 years ago, we had a general ratio of about 100 to 1 workers to robots.
Yeah.
And today we have about an 8 to 1 ratio workers to robots, which, should remind the world. 8 to 1 means it's still largely people running the show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you were gonna.
Well, so it talks or it brings a topic that you and I spoke about a while ago, which is the achievability, right? Like to setting goals and defining what a facility will do, but what is the role of automation? Or if there's a potential of automation, where does it start and what does it not do?
Right. It's like what people don't understand is what can often happen in a company, especially when it's led or has no input from people who are I mean, I will selfishly say engineers or operators or people who get stuff done, who have a record of achieving things in the real world, in bricks and mortars and flesh and blood and toil. What the strategy that people will set out when they've never actually accomplished anything in life can be completely disconnected from what's possible, what's achievable. And I experienced this myself on a project maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It was a network study. We were doing the distribution network, the fulfillment side of it, but there was another team working on the manufacturing process engineering, and they were given this mission of let's just say reducing the unit cost to manufacture something by 90%. Now, who invented that? No idea. Well, we know, and cynically you'd say, some sort of finance accounting person, which is, we know, we love our finance and accounting teams, we love our professionals, our consultants who are CAs. This is no, but the knock would be, you have these sort of finance types who look at the world from an income statement and a balance sheet and draw conclusions about the world, whether that is achievable or not. So they just come up with this, drop the unit cost of production by 90%. What do you need to do? Now, as an exercise, an intellectual exercise, I think that's a hell of a useful exercise. The point is, you don't necessarily run off and spend $90 million on an exercise that's led like that. No. There are too many risks. In the article I was reading, there was a Belarusian engineering firm that was doing all the tooling, and so you're talking about near shoring, but you had to send these dies out to Belarus for rework, and then that's many weeks long. There was so much.
Or adjusting some of the machinery. You had long delays to bring machinery to help or repair, or you had to drop. One of the solutions also was to drop capacity by half, and then not end up with defects or things, which throws the whole.
Of course, you drop capacity by half, and then the unit costs will go through the roof, and it's just amazing. So I guess the first thing I would say is achievability is not just about being able to get an idea realized in life, but it's about creating ideas that can be realistically implemented. And it almost always starts, or the problem almost always starts at that drawing board, the magical thinking of a strategy consultant who has no connection to how things get done.
Yeah. And as you say, if you start from the income statement, and then there's direction to say this is what we need to achieve, by people who don't actually know how, let's say, tools are made in this case, it's very tricky, especially if you want to bring it back home, where because home or U.S. or North America, where labor cost is extremely high, then it kind of forces you to consider high level of automation to do so, but without knowing if automation can actually do the task.
But in this Craftsman example, there are on-the-ground domestic competitors who manufacture tools in the United States. And what I found interesting, back to that 8-to-1 worker to robot ratio that the CEO of Snap-on provided, he was explaining that their strategy for automation is slow, deliberate. It's not a big bang, but it's actually a gradual sort of iterative learning process, and learning how to integrate automation into a human-led system, which of course means that your opportunity to lower your unit costs will be drawn out and longer, but the risks are much lower.
Yeah, automate the ones that a robot or a machine can absolutely do. Just learn to live with it. That's your first time living with automation, and then see what's the next one.
One of the things that, well, I will get into it. these kind of disasters, as we were talking about this article yesterday, and these kind of disasters where you're shutting a $90 million plant down because it just will never work, that there's no amount of money you can sink into it to repair the damage to your supply chain that you've caused. We've seen this before. In a couple of situations at least.
Where you were an expert
witness. Yeah, so twice. Both were similar to this. Both were production facilities that highly, if not fully, automated the material handling of the plants. And in both, well, in one case I was a witness for the defense, and in the other case I was a witness for the plaintiff.
Yeah, you told me there was a common theme between the two.
Yeah, well, and it's not related exactly necessarily to the Black & Decker or the Craftsman calamity or collapse or catastrophe. There's a bunch of alliterations you could use to describe that. But I do remember in both opportunities to sift through the project, sort of the entire project history, almost like an archaeologist, going through memos, meeting minutes, calendar invites, and then, of course, specifications, drawings, designs, everything. I mean, books and books and books and books. It was insane, especially one of them, they emailed it to me. So I had to take care of getting it all organized so I could read it. What a nightmare. But in both cases, the theme that was common to both is something that is now a life lesson for me, which is that automation, I mean, we could talk about the pulleys, the levers, the gears, the actual physical mechanics of a robot. That is so secondary to the information technology, what we call the digital aspects of that robot. Getting it to do what you want at the time that you want to meet the business's needs. Everybody starts off with this fantasy on a whiteboard. I think in a lot of areas of life we confuse what a hypothesis with a strategy. We think that because we have a hypothesis, we've developed a strategy, which is, of course, utter nonsense, right? And back to that, a hypothesis is something you should go out and test before you go and spend $90 million, right? And don't have an ego that makes you confuse your own hypothesis with a actual strategy. That's a silly and dangerous thing. But so they run along on these projects. They commit. In one case, we're talking about a material handling system that was in the $150 million range. I mean, it was enormous. And everyone's planning the design. Conveyors are being curved, where we're going to do some accumulation, how are we going to sort all these things, what about empty boxes, we have to devise a whole system for empty box, all this engineering work is being done. It's all brilliant and beautiful, and then halfway through the project someone says, well, what about control systems and integration? Oh yeah, let's get that going.
It's a little bit late in the project to figure out how that's going to work, especially if you want to meet a certain deadline.
Especially, and this is it. When you go off on an automation project committing $90 million in the Craftsman case, or call it 2-3 years of net income to this project, meaning you're a very tight operation you got to run while that's happening. Ooh boy, you cannot afford a 6-month delay, right? You cannot afford to lose 6, 9, 12 months. Like you said, between operating at 50% capacity or shutting down, it is cheaper to shut down. That's terrible. And in those two situations, that was my lesson. It was you start the technology discussion before you start anything else. How is my system going to communicate messages to your system? And it's not your system, it's 12 systems. Because what ultimately happens in a Craftsman disaster like this is there are lawsuits all over the place, right? There's so many people involved who run the risk of having their businesses go belly up because bad decisions were made.
Yeah, and when you talk about how the systems interact, it's not so much, well, it's not so much how they do it. The technology will figure it out, but it's what are they telling each other?
Right.
And
What is the
information?
And that's actually a really great point. I was talking with JM about this, who everyone knows as our technology leader, but people like to throw that around. Oh, we'll just integrate.
Mm-hmm.
The integration's simple. All you have to know is SOAP, and what's the other one?
Some APIs.
Sorry.
REST.
REST
SOAP
and
or REST.
SOAP. All you have to know that. Once you know that, you can do an integration. And of course, it's about what is the message. There's a table of information can be shared that's enormous. It's choosing what not to tell you is almost as important as what I'm telling you, right? Anyway, so that was a lot of fun.
And so, talking about getting a automation /IT project ready, there's this concept that we were talking about, which is automation preparedness, which means, well, like with any project, you analyze your current state and develop solutions. But once you have developed, let's say, a solution to automate a certain operation, a layout, defining like how ready you are to get there is extremely important as well. Not only from do I have enough space, but are my people ready? Are my people accustomed to taking on that kind of very large scale, capital intensive project?
Do I have the technology, physical, and human capital infrastructure to take this project on? Right. What we have is an army of CEOs who are reading articles, and they have the fear of missing out, FOMO as the kids say. They have this fear of missing out. They think, wow, the world's automating. Obviously, we always anticipate when we're afraid. We always think it's going much faster than it really is. And they want to rush and race along and drag their teams into these massive projects, right? It's almost like the first person that calls their banker to find out, hey, what could I get away with? And then I'm going to go tell my VP of Ops, hey, I guess what, good news, I've secured a $10 million line of credit. Now automate something, anything. And so we know there are disasters that come from that. The Craftsman is a great example. The examples we just talked about are great examples. So what we're doing, and this is kind of exciting, by the end of the month, free on our website. I don't know if it'll get published by the end of the month on the website, but we'll have it ready to be in its shape. It's just a simple automation preparedness index survey. You fill out the survey. It's 10 simple questions. But if you can't score 10 out of 10 on those questions, you are not ready. Do not do it.
What?
You will ruin yourself.
Yeah, if you get into starting implementing without being ready, doesn't mean don't do it ever. It's just that here are the points that you need to.
I mean, listen, we're a business, so if you get 9 out of 10, that means call us. We'll work on the 1 out of 10 with you. But I mean, that's funny. It's true, of course. That is what we're here to do. But in all seriousness, it is such a problem that we do want to protect. Certainly, want to protect our clients from that kind of headlong rush into what is a hypothesis and not a strategy. And unless you are willing to do the hard work to be prepared for automation, then you're in the land of hypothesis and not strategy. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great way to end it.
Well, then let's end it. I mean, we nearly got to 20 minutes. We don't need to make everyone 20 minutes.
No.
Short and sweet.
I'm sure people press play and they say like 18, 19. Like, oh,
They're more willing.
Yeah.
But I told you, one of my old neighbors, he's listening. Thank you. So I got my mom and one of my old neighbors.
Perfect.
But he is actually in the automation business. So that's kind of cool. Actually, he was asking me, I will ask you one thing. he was asking me about what our thoughts are around augmented reality. Are we thinking, or anything about it? And I told him the closest we could get to it is some thoughts around like Google Glasses, where in theory, I don't know that anyone in their right mind would want to work 8 hours a day with Google Glasses on, but for anyone who doesn't understand the application, you'd have the smart glasses where information can be conveyed on the lens of the glass, so that when I'm walking down a warehouse, in theory, I should be able to identify my next pick visually by a cue in the lens, and I should be able to count the quantity I'm picking by just simply having the glass confirm how many cases I pulled. There are attractive things to it, and then there's is this user friendly, and
does it really bring an efficiency gain?
Right. Does it bring an
efficiency
gain?
or safety
or errors or whatever? Yeah. Actually, it was interesting. He and I were talking. Another silly marketing term is Industry 5.0.
Oh.
You didn't know we were on 5.0?
I was still on 4.
Right. Well, I thought we were on 4.0. I'm still in the steam engine revolution, so I don't understand any of these. But every few years, it's always like Deloitte or PwC, one of these giant accounting firms that comes up with something grabby. Yeah. When their sales pipelines start dropping, they invent a new. Oh, you guys don't know? It's Industry 6.9. And again, it's so much of business strategy is fear of missing out and hypothesizing. But anyway, Industry 5.0, and my buddy, he's actually he's a very achievability oriented person, and he was invited on a panel because he represents a large manufacturing automation company. He was invited on a panel to talk about Industry 5.0, and he does this little prep meeting with the two folks. Again, it actually was a Deloitte and a EY or something, and he says, guys, what is Industry 5.0? What does it mean? And then it's the revolution of taking automation but putting it in a human context.
Yeah.
And you'd think if only people would stop dreaming, or at least don't dream in technical, dream in real colors, dream in reality. We would never even have to get to past Industry 2.0. You could just common sense, automate within the human context. Our goal is not to go from 8 workers to 1 robot, down to 1 worker to 100 robots. Right. I mean, you could say, sure, in the future, right? In the year 2000, as Conan O'Brien would say. But let's go from 8 to 1 to 5 to 1. I bet that's pretty good. That's pretty helpful. You got a labor availability problem? 5 to 1. That's almost 50% of your workforce liberated in that environment.
Yeah.
Or whatever, All right, have a good weekend.
All right, you too.